Nobi Nobi is this interesting card-based tabletop RPG that originated in Japan in 2016 as an independent project by Takashi Konno. It was designed to be a game that could be played in Tokyo board game cafes, where people could pick it up, read the rules in a few minutes, and play with people they've never met without any previous RPG experience. In fact, the name is derived from the word to stretch and means to feel at ease. It turns out that this game ended up being very popular in Japan, so much so that it was exported to Italy in 2022, where it has sold around 30,000 copies so far, and the French version is about to be released. At the time of recording, the English version of Nobi Nobi is crowdfunding on Kickstarter. I'll leave a link below. Each release has been a couple of decks of cards. So the first release included the magic and sword decks. Then the second release was horror and thriller. You can actually play the game with all these decks shuffled together if you want. The English version Kickstarter will include these 4 decks, and if they raise enough money, then they might include a steampunk and a cyberpunk deck, or possibly some other themes. Alright, so here is how the game works. By the way, brace yourself for super simplicity. This isn't exactly Pathfinder here. Just keep in mind where and why this game came about. At the start, each player chooses a pre-made character that has 2 stats and 1 skill. An introduction card is drawn and read out loud to start the story with a scene. Then one player becomes the first GM, and the next player is the first main character. The GM then draws and reads a scene card and needs to narratively connect it to the scene that has been established. Then it's up to the main character for that round to solve the scene. It could come down to a skill check, which is 2d6 plus technique or power versus the scene difficulty. So for example, if I were the main character and my character was the mercenary and the scene was wandering spirit, I would be trying to comfort the ghost and liberate it from its suffering. The scene calls for a technique skill check of 10 to comfort the ghost. That would be 2d6 plus my technique stat to meet or exceed a 10. If I fail that roll, then the ghost attacks me with power 14. That would mean I need to roll 2d6 again and add my power stat to the roll in order to try and meet or exceed 14 to resist the attack. If my character succeeds a check, then a light card is drawn. Light cards always give you a bonus in a positive context. In the case of this illustrator card, I would get +1 to my technique stat. Now, this is a good time to point out that the cards don't always mesh perfectly with the narrative being told. In this case, the illustrator card says that I'm inspired as a person who is always drawing by this encounter, and I get a +1 to technique. You just have to roll with it. That's part of the fun. Anyway, if you fail a check, then the GM draws a darkness card for you. Here's furry costume. I drew this card randomly when making this video, but it does sort of reinforce my point about randomness. Due to my character's adorable black bunny costume, I get a -1 to power and +2 to technique. So that would be a skill check. But the GM for that turn could also call for a role scene, that's ROLE, where the main character for that turn is asked to roleplay a very small particular scene, and the GM decides on success or failure depending on the interaction. In these kinds of scenes, other players can also chime in and try to help the main character. After the resolution of the scene, whether it's by a skill check or a pure roleplay check, the GM and main character roles are passed clockwise, and you repeat this all the way around the table 3 full times. So after the first GM plays as GM for the 3rd time, someone draws an epilogue card. This is always going to be a huge skill check involving multiple rolls by everyone. And then that's it. That's the session. My biggest takeaways from this game are that 1, narratively, it's pretty random. The more cards you have in a deck, the better in terms of not getting repeats on repeat plays. But once you start combining decks from different genres, that randomness factor is going to get a lot more intense. You're never going to die. There aren't hit points, just 2 stats that tend to go up even when you fail, and the epilogues appear to be foolproof in terms of eventually getting a success. And 3, there's no real burden on the GM. They interpret scene cards 3 times in an entire session. What all this means is that this game is engineered to be the softest, gentlest introduction to RPGs that you can imagine. It still has some structure to it. You have characters and a narrator and a beginning, middle, and end of a story. You also have dice rolls against the target or difficulty, and in a rudimentary way, you even have character growth, but everything is light and simple, so that anyone who might be intimidated by traditional RPGs could be lured into the hobby with a game like this. Furthermore, there are the different genres, so you can sort of pick and choose the flavor of your collective story, all without asking for any real commitment or paperwork from anyone. I think this is a great concept. Obviously, the chibi style artwork and ultra shonen thematics might not be for everyone. Maybe some folks want something darker and more violent, or just something more serious. The thing is, there's nothing stopping you from getting this game, studying it as a designer, and then making something of your own. It's undeniable that this format of RPG has resonated with a lot of people. And I think the reason is that it's very appealing to just be able to sit down and start telling a story together. Again, you're still role-playing here. You're still rolling dice against a target. Your character is still growing over the course of the story. There's just almost nothing else that you have to worry about. If you have young children or nieces and nephews or friends or significant others who cannot get into traditional RPGs, then this is exactly the kind of game you'd want to try on them. I've left a link below to where you can check out the project. Let me know about your experiences with ultralight RPGs and when you've had the most fun with them. Thanks as always for watching. See ya!
Nobi Nobi, Nobi Nobi, 物語が始まる。運命のダイス転がる。君は誰？ヒーローか悪役？運命の指輪が選んだものを星の光、闇に揺れる。君の脳天はどこへ続く？伸び伸び広がる世界。君は何者にでもなれる。新しい仲間とまた出会う。君の物語どこまでも。道なき道歩んでいけ。今日の君が描く未来。勇者も影の忍びも全てが主役。君は君でも物語は変わる。光と影が交差する。君の旅はまだ続いてる。のびのび広がる世界。今日の君は何者だろう。あったらご経験無限の夢。君の物語終わりなき。昨日の君と明日の君。変わり続けて回る世界。巻いてするダイスの音が新たな扉を開く。のびのび広がる